There are so many unsolved murders in the world, it's tough to decide on where to begin. The macabre and morbid fascinate almost everyone, even if they say it doesn't. It's the chilling fact that these murders did happen, and no one knows for sure why. It's a scary thought, and deep down inside, we all like to be scared. I chose these three because of how mysterious these murders are. Let's start, shall we? The Hinterkaifeck murders. I heard about this incident a long time ago. In fact, this is the case that sparked my interest to the entire topic of unsolved murders. Germany, 1922, there was once a farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. Now, that wasn't the official name of the place, it was near the hamlet of Kaishek, and Hinter, translated from German, means behind, Hinterkaifeck, or behind Kaifeck. On Tuesday, April 4th, neighbors went to the farmstead, as they were concerned. It's been a few days since any of the people on the farm were last seen, and one of the children had been missing from school. It didn't take them long to find their missing neighbors, however. The older couple and their daughter, along with her child, were found in the barn, dead. The other victims, a maid and a 2-year-old child, were found in the house. They both shared the same fate. The maid was found in her bedroom, and the 2-year-old Joseph was found in his mother's room, lying on the cot. It was concluded that a mattock was used as the murder weapon. Robbery was the first thought the police had, yet further investigation of the area proved that could not be the case when a large amount of money had been found in the home. The person or persons involved stayed at the farm for several days, so they would have eventually found that money. Well, if that was what they were after in the first place, that is. Another theory was that Victoria's husband, Carl, was responsible. Carl was supposedly killed in World War I, but his body was never found. However, people who witnessed Carl's death told the police that it couldn't have been him. Over 100 suspects were questioned, the most recent being in 1986. Nothing came of it. All that is known is that months prior to the murders, the family had mentioned to neighbors about unknown footprints in the snow, from the forest edge to the farm, but none leading back. The previous maid quit as she believed the farmstead was haunted. She was hearing noises and it sounded like footsteps in the attic. And also, a set of house keys went missing. The police believe that the victims in the barn were lured there one at a time. Whoever was responsible then went to the house to kill the 2-year-old child and the maid Maria. Maria just started the day of the murders, as she was there to replace the previous maid who quit. This case had never been solved, and more likely it never will be. The Icebox murders. On June 23, 1965, in Houston, the police were asked to check up on an elderly couple, 81-year-old Fred Rogers and his wife, 79-year-old Edwina. They searched the house and find nothing. Before the officers called it a day, they decided to check the kitchen. One of the officers opened the fridge, but all they could see was meat stacked up. To quote the officer's partner, it looked like somebody had butchered a hog. It wasn't until they looked in the bottom where the vegetable tray was did they notice a human head. It was the bodies of both Fred and Edwina. It was discovered that they were killed a week prior to being put in the fridge. Edwina was beaten brutally and then shot. Fred, however, had his head crushed and his internal organs flushed down the toilet. Then the murderer cut up the bodies and stacked the pieces into the fridge. The prime suspect? The third resident of the home, their son, Charles Rogers. He has never been found to this day, and in July of 1975 he was declared dead. Charles was believed to be the main suspect of the murders, but since he was never found, it is still considered, by the police, an unsolved case. Although there are 2 people, Hugh and Martha Gardner, who believe that they have solved it, however. They believe that it was Charles. They say that after he murdered his parents, he fled to Mexico. With his connections, as he was considered a brilliant seismologist and geologist, he was able to stay hidden. That is, until his death in Honduras during a mining dispute. There were theories that Charles was involved with the CIA, but that was never proven. The same could be said with Hugh and Martha's theory as well. Now, regardless of their theory, and the fact that pretty much everyone, myself included, believes that Charles is guilty, the Houston police still classify this case as unsolved. Room 1046. Kansas City, Missouri, at the President Hotel, now known as the Hilton President, Kansas City, is home to a very bizarre unsolved murder. In January of 1935, a bellboy was making his way to room 1046, as the phone in that room was left off the hook. He knocked, but he got no response, so he used his key to let himself in. The bellboy turned on the light to the room, and once he did, he saw a man holding his head and covered in blood. That man was Roland T. Owen. Roland had been staying in that room for the last few days. When the police arrived, they found Roland was still alive, but barely. He was bound at the neck, the wrists, and the ankles. There were several knife wounds and a punctured lung. He also had a fractured skull. The investigators believed that he was tortured. The blood was everywhere in the hotel room, even on the ceiling, and most of it had dried. According to the doctor, that would mean the injuries were about 6 or 7 hours old. Now all this right here, it's mysterious already, but it gets even crazier. When Roland checked into the hotel, he only had with him a comb, a hairbrush, and toothpaste. That's it. The maids of the hotel reported some oddities as well. One maid states that Roland liked to keep the room dark, and on his first day there he asked the maid to keep the door open as he was expecting a friend. Another maid said that when she knocked on the door to deliver fresh towels, a rough voice answered from the other side of the door, "We don't need any towels." The night before the murder, about 11 p.m., Robert Lane was flagged down by a man running towards him in just his underwear. The unknown man thought that Lane was a cab driver. Lane was nice enough to drive him to a cab and noticed that his passenger had a cut on his arm. The stranger just nodded and said that he would get his revenge tomorrow. Robert Lane identified his crazed passenger as Roland T. Owen. The police were having difficulty solving this case, obviously. What made it worse was the fact that Roland T. Owen didn't seem to exist. There were no records of him. The police put a sketch of the unknown man in the paper, imploring anyone who knew him to come forward. No leads that would help with the investigation came from it. Days before the funeral, though, money for the service arrived. There was no return address and no name on the envelope. Then some more money arrived for a wreath, along with an anonymous note. The note read, "Love forever, Louise." Roughly a year later, Eleanor Ogletree was reading about the unsolved murder in American Weekly, and believed that the unknown man looked exactly like her brother, Artemis. The last time Artemis was seen was in 1934. It very well might have been Artemis, but we'll never know for sure. That's why this unusually bizarre case is still unsolved. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please don't forget to hit that like button and then subscribe. If you have any suggestions or topics that you would like me to research and talk about, please don't hesitate to share them with me. Once again, my name is Rick, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Unsolved.